Don't miss the final Frist Friday of the year on November 14th. Enjoy a 1960s-themed celebration inspired by the Frist Art Museum's latest exhibition, Paul McCartney Photographs 1963 to 1964, Eyes of the Storm. DJ John Stamps will be spinning classic hits all night long. Enjoy art, music, creative activities, and retro fun. Dress to impress and get ready to twist and shout. Get details and advance tickets at fristartmuseum.org. Today on CityCast Nashville, it's been 1 year since voters overwhelmingly passed the Choose How You Move transit referendum. And just last week, after SNAP benefits were suspended, WeGo expanded its new Journey Pass program, which provides free bus fare to low-income riders. But so many people showed up that organizers had to turn some folks away. Clearly, people want and need more access to public transit. Our executive producer, Whitney Pasterek, talks today with Sabrina Sussman, Chief Program Officer for Choose How You Move, about community expectations, the tangible results we've seen so far, and can we just have free buses, dang it? It's Monday, November 10th. I'm your host, Marie Cecile Anderson, and this is what Nashville's talking about.
Do you take public transportation?
I do. In fact, let me just tell you a little funny story. Maybe you might know this. I moved in June. And when I came down in April for the announcement, I was also here looking for some housing and was chatting with a realtor. And they said, well, what's important to you? And I said, well, I want to be able to walk or take the bus to work, a grocery store, a coffee shop or two, a couple restaurants like that. And the realtor sort of laughed and was like, right, you're from out of town. Okay, well, that narrows it down. Here are a couple neighborhoods for you to look at. So I actually selected where I'm living based on the ability to do that.
That's amazing. Well, yes, you did come to Nashville for this job, and you had previously been at the U.S. Department of Transportation, where you served under Secretary Pete Buttigieg. What brought you to our city? And just briefly, what brought you to this work?
Yeah, I will tell you, it was not on my 2025 bingo card, a big move to Nashville and undertaking Choose How You Move. But I was frankly kind of blown away with how the stars aligned for Nashville in the last couple of years. Passing the referendum, unlocking dedicated transportation funding, that's really incredibly rare and very hard to do. You know that. It took sort of the second try here. You learn lessons from failed attempts that you then apply to successful attempts. And frankly, the ability to come and to lead such a generational investment for this community is really astonishing. I think the mayor did an incredible thing in structuring Choose How You Move in a way that really was a bit of a return back to basics. It was an honest conversation that said, we're not where we should be. We have a lot of room to grow. And this investment has to help get us there. And being a part of that, being a part of what will be such a significant change for this community, really just felt like an opportunity that was hard to pass up.
Well, y'all recently announced more than $100 million in capital investments for sidewalks, signals, transit service, and safety. This was the second round of funding that's gone out. For transit riders, I think the bus frequency improvements have been phenomenal and are making a huge difference already. I just got an email about a whole lot more that are coming out. One place I think people feel like frequency could improve is the airport. When can we hopefully see buses more frequently out there?
Well, it's interesting that you ask. As part of the $104 million investment, we actually slipped in a couple lines about how we're going to be working with the airport to really think about the transit user experience. And so that includes things like frequency. It includes duration of ride. It includes wayfinding and other elements of what it's like to ride transit to and from the airport.
And a grateful city says thank you. An exhausted city sends their thanks for that. But when can non-transit riders expect to see a sort of similarly tangible result, like a massive sidewalk project, for example?
Well, we're really excited. As part of the $104 million, we broke it out into a couple categories. And the areas where people will both see and feel impacts the soonest are in sidewalks and signals. So on sidewalks, breaking ground on a couple of sidewalks in the coming months, being able to really start to do some of that connecting that's just so desperately needed in Davidson County. Right now, when it comes to signals, already laying fiber, trying to sort of take care of what people don't see unless they're seeing the construction, but that you feel a big difference. It's interesting with signal enhancements, there's sort of two pieces. There's the part you definitely never see, which is the fiber underneath. And then there's the thing that you're used to staring at for a while, the big yellow box, right? And what's interesting about signal advancement, maybe if you're kind of a bit of a transportation tech nerd like I am, is that you need both parts to fully unlock the best impact, right? So we're going to be working on both, and there will be some cases where you'll have the fiber, but we won't necessarily change out the big yellow box quite yet. But then when we do that, you'll just be seeing the difference. But people are going to start to feel that, right? If you've ever driven out in a city outside of Nashville, Nashville has sort of a disproportionate amount of time spent behind red lights. And so the way that you'll see that is you'll actually just see more green.
Okay, again, an exhausted city. Thanks you. Let's talk about a big part of Choose How You Move, which was all access corridors. These are roads that are designed to have dedicated bus lanes, transit centers, better sidewalks, all the good stuff. What's the action plan for implementing those?
Our recent announcement shared that we're going to be starting with Nolensville, Gallatin, and some of the work downtown. That really means starting, right? And so we don't have pre-baked designs. We don't have necessarily specific ideas of what it's going to look like. So we're kicking off some of that early work. Actual construction on those designs are still years out, but are there improvements we're going to be able to make along the way? Absolutely. That's, again, where the signals, the sidewalks, all that other good stuff comes into play.
One of the early all-access corridors was supposed to go down Murfreesboro Pike, which is now the topic of some really unexpected conversation as something else is going down Murfreesboro Pike, and that's a Tesla tunnel. Can we even put one there? We all know now that's a state road, but having that all-access corridor to the airport above ground would be terrific. Is that still on the table?
Absolutely still on the table. A little fun fact for you, actually, 89% of the all-access corridors that are in Choose How You Move are state routes. So the work that we're doing will be on state routes primarily. That's where a really good relationship with TDOT and a partnership with the state is super important, because things like final road design do have to go through TDOT for approval. And in the case of dedicated bus lanes, through the legislature.
And then you also mentioned downtown. How do you think that the dedicated downtown bus lane pilot last month went? I know you're not in charge of Connect Downtown, but if it takes buses 30 minutes just to get out of that area, that seems like it then falls into and connects with your wheelhouse.
It does. I mean, all of these things are interwoven, obviously. And I think the best part about a pilot is that you start it out and you say, we have some learning to do, right? It gives you an opportunity to test things without formally committing to them. It allows you to see how much did it change travel times for buses? How much did it impact the ride? We know that it shortened the ride, right? Like, if that's one of the metrics for success, that was one that was hit. But there's other pieces of learning there. And so it's been good to sort of do that pilot over the last couple of weeks.
I know one thing that some Metro watchers are concerned about is sort of the pace and transparency of all of this. Like you said, the all access corridors, they're literally beginning from scratch right now. How are you dealing with things like transparency so that people can know what's going on, or maybe challenges with NDOT, who I know are struggling right now with in-house versus out-of-house construction projects and how fast they're literally able to move? I mean, I know this is a 15-year plan, but I think people are just ready to get moving.
Look, I will tell you, one of the best parts about my job is that people are so excited. That's not always the case in government, right? So it feels really nice to be somewhere where people are desperate for change, are super excited about what you're doing, and just can't wait to see it all. The challenge on the other side of that is that this stuff does take time, and upstart really does take a little bit. I will say there's a lot of work happening that people can't see. You know, we talk about construction as a site of what's to come. It's funny, I kind of remind people, when you see construction, sometimes your visceral response is a little bit of dissatisfaction or frustration because it takes you longer. But really, construction's a symbol for coming soon. So there's coming soon that you see on your drive, your walk, your roll, your bike, your bus. And then there's the coming soon that's sort of happening in the courthouse and in buildings and in meeting rooms, standing up a staff, spending time with our advisory committee. We did a bus tour with them. And that, to me, is a really big place when it comes to how do you start with transparency. If you bring folks and you put them on an advisory committee and commit to really making sure they know what we're up to, they know how we're making prioritization decisions, decisions, they then can share all that information with their communities that they represent on the committee. And then, of course, spending time with Metro Council and all the other ways that you can let people in to see some of the things that feel a little harder to imagine right now.
Okay, real talk though. Will this go at Choose How You Move's pace, or will this go at NDOT's pace?
Look, if we're going to do this, we're all going to have to move quickly. So one of the great things about Choose How You Move is I'm not out there building sidewalks by myself. We're all doing it together.
All right. And then our producer had a great question, which is, I know Freddie's really committed to transparency in terms of public information. Is there going to be any sort of tracker where the public can see where funds are being spent and maybe how projects are going as they move along?
Yeah, absolutely. Right now, we're building up all of that web presence, but it'll include a map. It'll include a tracker so you can see what projects are underway, what haven't been kicked off yet, really give you a sense of sort of how to evaluate how the program's doing.
You know, when most of us want to learn a new language, it's not because we're dying to memorize grammar tables or ace a quiz. It's because we actually want to speak it out in the real world with real people. And that's what Babbel is great at, getting you there fast. Hey, it's Michael Zibiak, Chief Revenue Officer here at CityCast. My daughter's a senior in high school, and after graduation, we're taking a father-daughter trip to Spain. And right now, my Spanish is, let's just say, very high school level. Shout out to Senior Patty from Syosset High School. You tried. When we're in Spain, I'd love to do more than just ask where the bathroom is. I want to be able to chat with locals, order tapas, and actually connect, not just read the menu and point. So I'm starting with Babbel. It's all about small steps, big wins, and it's super easy to fit into my life. Honestly, with how busy things get here at CityCast, I love that Babbel's bite-sized, 10-minute lessons fit right into my day, between meetings or over my morning coffee. I'm excited to pick up some real-world Spanish before we go, so we can experience Spain like locals, not tourists. Doesn't that sound better? Right now, Babbel's got a special deal for our listeners. Get up to 55% off your subscription at babbel.com/citycast. That's BABBEL.com/citycast for up to 55% off. Rules and restrictions may apply. Gracias and adios.
Guess what? CityCast has some news. I'm Sean McPherson, the host of CityCast Twin Cities.
And I'm Jane Sihu, and I'm the host of CityCast Seattle. Hey, if you have a friend in one of our cities, can you text them for us?
Yeah, something, simple like, hey, how's that rash doing? And do you listen to podcasts? Because I have one you're definitely going to like. After that, tell them that CityCast has helped you become more informed, more involved, and more connected to your amazing city.
We're going to help that person you know in Seattle who's been trying to make friends.
And we're also going to do that for that guy you only kind of knew in college who moved back to the Twin Cities after graduation.
Don't we all have that guy?
Yeah, and usually that guy is named Todd.
So did you text them yet?
Jane, let's just wait a minute. We don't want to rush anybody. We'll do a little small talk. How's everything going in Seattle?
Beautiful, beautiful. Fall leaves popping. How about Twin Cities?
Today, beautiful and sunshiny in St. Paul. Okay, Jane, I bet they are done texting by now, and I just want to remind them, hey, you, please tell that friend to subscribe to CityCast Twin Cities or Seattle, wherever you get your podcasts.
Or if you don't want to text them and you're really just on Instagram sending them DMs all the time with like funny videos, send them a DM of our latest videos. You can find us at CityCast Twin Cities or CityCast Seattle on Instagram. Thanks.
And we're back with Sabrina Sussman, Chief Program Officer of Choose How You Move here in Nashville. WeGo recently introduced the Journey Pass, which was part of this Choose How You Move initiative, and it's providing free bus passes to income-eligible residents. The rollout has not been great, but these seem more important than ever given the SNAP cuts with the government shutdown, all the ways people are struggling right now. So I want to ask you, first of all, what exactly is the income requirement to obtain a Journey Pass?
So one of the things maybe I'll start by saying is the rollout hasn't really fully started, right? We haven't announced the program. We're in early testing phases where we're making this available, and we're adding hundreds of new Journey Pass holders. I know this will air in a little bit, so the numbers will be higher on that day, but today we hit 1,700 Journey Pass holders. Right now, in this sort of pilot phase, the way in which you are deemed eligible is whether or not you participate in one of the service products that a metro agency offers. And so there is no income set. It's if you are already receiving services through one of the agencies, then you become eligible.
Can you give me an example of those agencies?
MDHA is the first agency where we started doing rollouts with. And one of the great things that we saw, the way we did it is we actually went on site and said to residents, hey, did you know that this is an option for you? And this is a really historic change. It's a really big change. It's desperately needed in town. And you're right, the timing is impeccable given some of the other social service constraints. But we want to do it right. Frankly, I think a lot about the environmental justice aspect of this work. You never, ever want to be in a position where you're giving someone access to something and then taking it away. And so a really methodical rollout that allows us to start agency by agency, building by building, allows us to make sure that we're doing it right for those people. And then as you add people, that they also won't have problems.
Yeah. Well, listeners, as you've now figured out, we are taping this in advance of this episode airing. So given the scramble, though, around this week's October 22nd first sign-up event at Metro Action, what have you heard from the community and how are you improving the accessibility and communication around future chances to sign up?
I think, frankly, the thing that I'm hearing about is that people are using it, right? And that this is already changing the way that people think about really basic things, even like grocery shopping. We heard from a resident who said, I make one big trip because the bus fare is too much. But the ability to say, now the trip to the grocery store isn't actually a financial burden changes the way you get to live your life. That's been the best part of watching the rollout over the last month or so.
Well, WeGo does estimate that 70% of current riders would be eligible for a Journey Pass. So that brings me to the biggest question on everyone's lips. Why can't we just have free buses, Sabrina, at least through the government shutdown?
Well, Whitney, you are just stroking all of the favorite things of a policy nerd's heart, talking about things like existential free transit. And, I worked in New York City as well. And so that's another city that's been having this conversation. There's lots of really interesting reasons why that might work well for some communities. And then there's lots of really interesting reasons from a policy perspective that it actually doesn't enforce the best sort of community engagement and treatment of the system, as well as the longevity. So right now, we're not in a place to make the system free. But I think the investments that Choose How You Move are making is really going to change our ridership, which is another big part of what makes a transit agency sustainable, right? If 70% of your ridership is low income, then you may not actually have the most sustainable model for fair income being one of the major economic drivers. But one of the goals of Choose How You Move is that we're adding new people riding WeGo, and that does change up the model a little bit.
You're also adding new funding, though, which is bringing a lot more money into the coffers and making those free fares a greater possibility.
Yeah, it's making the Journey Pass program a possibility, but it's also largely the operational funding is what's enabling us to make service changes, like the ones we did in July and then the ones we just announced for January, right? So there's really a tension there. There isn't, the Choose How You Move funding is really critical in meeting the objectives we set in the TIP. It's not sort of excess funding. It's really about being able to meet the standards we have now set, which is you shouldn't have to wait 45 minutes for a bus. They should be more frequent than that.
Another thing that's on so many people's minds here in Nashville right now is our housing crisis and how the city is addressing that. What is your vision when it comes to transit-oriented density?
Yeah, so the Choose How You Move program promised 12 transit centers. And what I think is really interesting is that they're all going to look a little different. So 3 of the ones I think about right here in downtown near my office is WeGo Central, a little north, the North Nashville Rip Patton Jr. Center, and then, of course, Hillsborough. Those 3 transit centers look completely different. And that's because you sort of have to build what the community needs. So of the 12 that we've promised, there are going to be some that are really deeply interwoven into an urban framework, like Sobro. And then there will be some that will look a little bit more like a Hillsborough short number of 3 or so bus depots. In cases where we can do it, being able to interweave a transit center into the urban core, make sure there's mixed use, make sure there's housing accessibility. That's what makes these centers like that successful.
This feels like a place where community engagement is especially necessary. So I'm wondering how much influence will what you're hearing from neighbors around conversations like density have over the design or the scope of what Choose How You Move is able to do?
Yeah, I mean, specific to transit centers, I think about the tremendous amount of community engagement that WeGo did around North Nashville. It was really important that they built a transit center that actually represented the community and that highlighted some of the things the community was most proud of. I don't know if you've been over there. It's a really beautiful place.
It's freaking gorgeous, yeah.
Yeah, and they did a really good job honoring history and sort of noting what's to come in the future. That's sort of a bit of the dream, right? Is being able to make sure that your community shows up, tells you what they want, you build it, and then they keep coming back.
Kind of on that same note, as I'm sure you've learned already, people in Nashville not only like to know what's going on, but they like to feel as though they've been asked before a decision is made. So we might have great ideas. For example, I think we need to culvert the ditch that runs through my neighborhood and make it into a walking trail to better connect all of us without having to go out into Gallatin. Can this program include ideas like that too?
Well, government is always open to ideas. I love to remind folks, Hub Nashville is the place where you can take these things so that we can actually have some metrics behind it, right? Let's say you put that idea in and no one else ever did. But let's say you and 4,700 of your favorite friends did also. That's really going to help move some of the numbers and how we think about that community input. I think, we are going to be running a community input process for all of our big corridors, for all of the big projects. And that's where we want to hear people's voices. I'll tell you, the thing that I know is that 66% of voters voted for Choose How You Move. And so I know that 66% of voters have an opinion on how they want that money spent. I'd love to hear it. The goal is to build a system that the community feels represents them, achieves their goals, and makes their life better.
I don't have 4,700 people who live in my immediate neighborhood, but I'm going to get on it. We did an episode about the food desert and the growing food insecurity crisis in North Nashville. And something that we heard during that episode was this concern that when things get nicer, for example, the Kroger on Monroe is now being painted millennial gray. And that to residents is a sign of gentrification. How do we ensure that our transit system doesn't kind of get gentrified like everything else and it becomes something that is able to be used by all Nashvillians?
I think that's a really important conversation that we have as part of the engagement and part of when we think about design, right? Part of community engagement when it comes to transportation projects is really establishing a vision and goals for the project. And if one of the goals is to protect and sustain the community that's there now, you really have to think about, well, what does that mean for the housing that we put in? What does that mean for the density and the land use patterns that we're putting in? How does that maybe impact what we like in the transportation nerd world to call modal priority? How do we make sure the people that live here can keep moving around their community?
I mean, just to be blunt, how do we make sure that these new riders that we're bringing to the system are cool interacting with their neighbors who might come from different walks of life, where their housing is less stable, where their health is less stable? Is there going to be any kind of community education around this as you seek to increase ridership?
I definitely think that that's a part of it, right? Hearing about Nashville over the last 15 years, your explosive population growth. There's a lot of people here today that weren't here 15 years ago. And education can be reactionary or it can be proactive, but it's absolutely a part of changing ways in which you move. The thing about single occupancy vehicles is you don't really interact with other people very much, except for when something has gone horribly wrong and you're interacting with them a little too much. But on public transit, that's part of the fun, right? Is you actually get to see your community in action. You get to meet your neighbors. You get to feel the safety and security of being around a lot of other people. And so one of the things I look forward to is as ridership increases, hearing more and more stories about people who are experiencing new parts of the city, maybe with new people too.
All right, last question. I guess what's the biggest goal for year 2? If we have this conversation a year from now, what do you hope that you're able to come on here and say?
Year 1 is really about initiating. Year 2 is about hitting the stride now that you've had all the people moving in the right direction. So actually doing all of those groundbreakings, doing some ribbon cuttings, really being able to say we've done some first community engagement and we know what direction we're headed in with Nolensville, Gallatin, and downtown. It's a long to-do list. But one of the things that gives me some comfort is that there are so many people who are really enthusiastically excited about seeing it come to life.
Thank you so much for being here. I really can't wait to do this again, hopefully next year, and for you to have great news and for us to all be taking free buses everywhere.
I mean, it's a date a year from now. How about that?
I would love it. That's all for today here on CityCast Nashville. And don't forget, you can support this show and get great perks by becoming a CityCast Nashville neighbor at membership.citycast.fm. And if you enjoyed the show, hey, why not tell your friends? Rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our Hey Nashville newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Y'all take care of each other.